Right, today we're going to take a quick look at one of the two variants of the new Nanmu Allosaurus figure. This is the more brightly coloured variant. I like to think of these colours as being somewhat sunset-like. There is a figure which is more sort of blue in its tone, which more closely resembles the colours of the battle at Big Rock Allosaurus from the short film. Apart from that, and the shark tooth looking spines along the back of the neck and along the hips, that's about the only resemblance this figure has to that character, which I'm really pleased about because I was not a fan of that character design. And it's unusual to see Nanmu really do their own thing because they tend to quite closely follow the designs of the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World franchise. So this is definitely more designed as a collector's item, and as such they have packaged it in a very classy package, with the photograph of the figure on the front and some nice artwork. And contained within the package we also have a very nice art card with some information on the back. And unfortunately I'm not able to interpret any of this information, but it is an absolute visual feast. It's really nicely done. It's a really nice inclusion in the package. And it's interesting to note that the drawing of the Allosaurus on the back is actually more true to the anatomical features of Allosaurus than the actual figure itself. But I'll get onto that in a little bit. Also contained within the package you get this little human figure who bears a striking resemblance to Claire Dearing in that famous Paddock 9 scene. And she is here to provide a bit of scale for the Allosaurus. Now if I put the Allosaurus there and bring Claire up, you can see that the Allosaurus is either oversized or Claire is somewhat undersized compared to the Allosaurus. Allosaurus was not really this large compared to a human being. It was a huge predator. I forget how huge it was, but it was not quite to this kind of size. I don't think even Saurophaganax got to this kind of size, but we're not going to worry too much about that. I'm really quite taken with Claire here, so I'll pop her to one side. As you can see, this figure is in a very, very dynamic pose. It's really got a great sense of movement to it, definitely superior to W. Dragon's Guanji, which looks a little bit stiff at the knees. And another thing about this figure is it's on a kind of left cant. It's leaning over slightly, and I was really concerned about this because figures when they're on one foot do tend to distort and tip a little. However, they seem to have taken a leaf out of W. Dragon's book and made these legs out of a harder material. They're separately attached to the body, and again we'll have a look at that a little bit later. So I don't foresee there being any problems with this distorting or anything like that in time. Time will tell. Of course, because it's got these smaller feet, it will not stand on its own. Pop it to one side and take a look at the base. You can see there's a lovely depiction of Allosaurus' skull here, and also that this Allosaurus is named Blade. I can only presume that's on account of the blade-like teeth that Allosaurus had. It's got quite a slick bottom, so it might slide on a smooth surface. It kind of depicts an estuarine type environment, this sort of muddy, sandy type of look, wet and squishy as you can see. It really does give you that kind of sense. Heaped up a little bit behind the ankle, which I can only presume is for added support. It's a nicely sculpted sort of ammonoid on here. I've got no idea what species that might be, sadly I don't know enough about them. And a few bones littering the base here as well, which is a nice touch. As you can see, there's a paintbrush hair caught in the base of mine, which is testament to its hand-painted nature. It really is a classy piece. And unlike a lot of bases, it's actually got two pegs to support the feet of assorted heights, as you can see, to prevent the figure from rotating on there. And that's a really, really nice touch. So if I just bring Blade back, we'll take a quick look at the underside. You can see here those peg holes which slot on. Now, the only thing I found was that this front one was a little bit on the tight side, and I had to hollow it out a little more to get the figure to sit down comfortably. It's not something that's a massive worry, it really is very, very minimal. And we can just see some of the detail on the underside of the figure here as well. You can see they've gone more for a wrinkled skin type texture rather than sort of overt scales, which would probably be more accurate at this kind of scale. And I'm not too worried about the wrinkles. I'm getting a bit wrinkly these days as well, so, you know, that doesn't bother me at all. You can see that the jaw, the lower jaw, the mandible, is slightly more textured than any other part of the body, which is a little bit unusual. You can see the position of the hands from here as well. You can see that they're not pronated, but they're not quite uncinnated either. However, the elbows are sticking out a little, and if they were folded in, maybe the hands would be fully uncinnated. Again, it's not something I'm going to worry about too much. What I will say is the hands and the forelimbs in general are perhaps still a little bit undersized. Allosaurus had really big, powerfully clawed hands. They have, however, depicted the big thumb claw compared to the other fingers, which is a really nice touch. There is no overt sign of a cloacal vent, although there is a slight indentation here. Now if we sit the blade back on the base here, something's going to be a little tricky setting it down. There we go. So that's not going anywhere, that's not going to rotate or anything at all. Now let's have a closer look at the figure itself. As you can see, the eyes bulge quite nicely, even though you can see the skull is a little bit anachronistic in that it's got these very sunken fenestrae, which as we know is probably not the case. However, it is fantastically detailed. You can see the nostril at the front here, and the paintwork's all very, very nicely blended. I do love these sort of sunset colours. I think they look really, really good on this figure. There's a little ear canal opening there as well. And you can see the eyes, they're very, very red. Doesn't really show up so well on the camera, but they are incredibly blood red eyes, and they're picked out in a very high gloss, which really makes them pop and brings them to life. The jaw is articulated, but on mine it's quite stiff, so you only get about that degree of movement, and it's kind of pops back. It doesn't close fully. I think even if it did close fully, there wouldn't be any lips present. And you can see that, oddly, the lower jaw is more heavily textured than any other part of the body. You do get these lovely, big, different, various sized scales along the maxilla though as well. And you can see that, as well as these beautiful crests that Allosaurus is famous for, they've accessorised with extra little hornlets and things along the crest of the nose here. And that looks really, really good. It really does look very, very nice. And I think that's probably the case. I mean, these things went into biting each other's faces. They probably did have a lot of keratin and armaments up there. The overall shape of the skull, I've never seen two Allosaurus skulls look the same. Dorsally, it's perhaps a little bit narrow at the front, to be honest. If you look at it from the front, it hasn't got binocular vision, which is correct. So that's good. Really, overall, it is a pretty good match for Allosaurus, the overall shape. As Allosaurus figures go, this is definitely more on the gracile side. They either tend to fall into two camps. They're either really gracile or they're too stubby. This is definitely more the former camp. A bit like T-Rex, there's loads of figures of Allosaurus out, but very few of them actually managed to get that sweet happy medium. As you can see, the torso's definitely foreshortened compared to the art on the back of that card there. And also the legs look a little long, but that's simply because the gut doesn't come down as far as it probably would in life. But overall, you know, the shape of the head, the size of the head, the length of the neck, etc. is all pretty good. The tail is perhaps a smidge on the long side. The tail seems to go on forever, and it's very, very whip-like at the end. But Allosaurus did have a very long tail, and it is nicely muscled. There's a nice CFM down here. Getting back to the details of the body, you can see it's got this lovely sort of dewlap under the throat, which is very, very fine, and it looks really, really nice, this, and I like the fact it's a slightly darker colour. It really, really does look very effective, and the overall effect of the head is very, very bird-like. Getting down the back of the neck, it has got some larger, irregular scales and scoots going down here, just as a bit of extra protection for the skin, but these aren't overly textured. They're really, really nicely done. Really, really good. And there's one or two little issues with the production. You can see there's a seam here where the arms are attached, and you also notice that there is a very slight sort of step where the head's attached here. You can just see it there. But really, overall, in the texture of the figure, it kind of blends quite nicely. It's not something that would pop out and spoil the appearance of the figure at all. Again, the legs are separately attached, and there is perhaps a slight seam around here, but because of the texture, and you don't really notice it. It certainly doesn't spoil the figure at all. These wrinkles and textures are perhaps a little bit overbaked, but again, it's very nice. It's a very easy figure on the eye. Very, very well done. Very pleasantly done. And one thing which is slightly unusual compared to theropod feet is the feet are perhaps actually a little bit undersized. But as you can see, it's got really big, thick, well spread toes bearing the weight of the animal, which is a nice touch. So we'll just pop her back on the base here. So overall, Allosaurus is my favourite dinosaur. As I've said, they do tend to fall into two camps, the models. They're either too gracile or too stubby, and the only thing that affects whether or not I choose a figure then is the details and how convincing they are, perhaps, as a living animal. So this is why this figure has quickly become my favourite Allosaurus figure. It has even usurped Guanji, I shall bring in, by Nanmu. Here, as you can see, he sits quite nicely next to Gwanji. And the figure which got me back into collecting toy dinosaurs, which is Papu's Allosaurus here, because I had never seen a dinosaur toy of this quality until I came back to collecting. This is what brought me back. So I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this absolutely fabulous offering from W Dragon with me. I absolutely love it. I'm over the moon with this figure and I highly recommend it. And I hope you all stay safe and I hope I see you in the next video.